Welcome, everyone, to the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee of Council on March the 6th, 2023. The first order of business is reading of the land acknowledgement, and Councillor Potts will be doing us the honor this evening.
For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationship it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation.
Thank you. I'll now read, with respect to the adoption of the agenda, that the content of the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee agenda for March 6, 2023 be adopted as presented. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Houston. Would there be any amendments anyone wishes to speak to? There's one I'll raise, and that is I would like to move item 6.5, which has to do with our in-house water, wastewater, utility billing, to 6.1. So it would be the first of the staff reports, and this just to accommodate a few people here this evening who wish to speak to that item. Yes, Councillor Doherty.
Yes, Mayor, I will be adding a notice of motion under other business tonight.
Okay, thank you. And with those two amendments in mind, can we have a vote then on the agenda? Thank you, and that's unanimous. Would there be any declarations of pecuniary interest? Being none, if you find yourself in that position, please let me know. Are there any deputations this evening, Clerk Almes?
Not this evening, Your Worship.
And there's one item on the consent agenda, and I'll read it in, that Council herein receive the general consent agenda, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are that of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. 5.1, motion to support Township of Ashfield, Colborne, Wanashas, future accuracy of the Permanent Register of Electors. The Council support the Township of Ashfield, Colborne, Wawanosh in its request to the Province of Ontario through Elections Ontario and the Chief Electoral Office to utilize any resources available to produce the highest quality permanent register of electors for municipal election purposes. And further, that this resolution be circulated to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Elections Ontario, and AMO. Would there be a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor Fryer and Councillor Doherty. Clerk Almes, do you want to speak to this item?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for the committees and public's information, we do regularly get correspondence provided to the town of Collingwood. We do post them publicly on our website, and there are certain instances where staff feel it's important if there hasn't been a member of council that has pulled an item to put forward on a consent agenda, and this is one of those items. So this speaks to the voters list for municipal elections, and staff, municipal clerks around the province previous years have noticed a lot of inconsistencies and errors, inaccuracies with the voters list. We in particular noticed some concerns this year, in particular more substantial than previous years, knowing though that the province is going to be taking over the voters list for the next provincial election, and this notice or resolution of support will further indicate that we're looking for a high quality voters list by the province whenever they take it over. So staff fully do support this motion.
Thank you. Would there be any questions or comments on this? Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I just I guess if the clerk is satisfied that this says enough, but I found it very vague and not really, I thought there might be some more concrete solutions that might be suggested and go along with it. So I did find it kind of vague because they might think that's the job that's already being done. And so how can we tell them any different? So that was my only concern with the motion. It seemed a little vague.
Yeah, yes.
Just a
Councillor
question for
Baines.
information or clarification through you, Madam Chair, to the clerk. Will the province be conducting a door-to-door enumeration of actual residents of the home, or do you know?
Go ahead, yeah, Gomez.
Through the chair. The full details aren't known at this time, and obviously we've just went through a municipal election, so it's going to take them some time to figure it out before they put procedures in place. I would expect that would be the best route for them. They would be able to, one of the benefits is obviously using the election lists with the province that they use for provincial elections. Obviously there is in a provincial election, you can only vote once. We're in a municipality. Your tenancies and ownerships in various other municipalities does count. So they're going to have to take that into account. So let's fingers crossed.
One would hope. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Jeffrey.
I would be interested from the clerk if it would be helpful at least to ask that they at least consult with the Clerks and Treasurers Association when they determine sources are and how they're going to tackle it. I think that's more important, that they come back and consult with the people who use it and how they use it, as opposed to going out with what they think it is we need. So I wouldn't mind adding an amendment if there was a seconder to say that they consult with, is it AMCTO with respect to potential solutions or whatever. I don't know what the words would be, but
The second that, yeah. Are there any comments or questions about that? I'll just say I'm sure I wasn't alone in finding the electors list in this past election. You know, I can't even think of a nice word. Terrible. It was out of date. It was an embarrassment, really. And for the amount of corrections that had to be made, you know, as I say, I found it to be an embarrassment. Whether we could make this also stronger, we could add a whereas clause, I guess, to say whereas council found the voters list to be terrible. But anyway, I guess that'll be implied because they'll get a lot of these. Okay, so we have Councillor Jeffrey's amendment on the floor. I didn't see any questions or comments. All those in favor? And then we'll vote on the main motion. All those in favor? And those are unanimous. Thank you. So the first staff report this evening, as I mentioned in terms of amending the agenda, is T 2023-06, and this has to do with water, wastewater, utility billing. And we have our treasurer here to provide her report. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, members of council, for entertaining a little bit earlier in this report. There's a bunch of minor hockey games happening tonight that are a little bit important to some of our kids here, so it was great to move this up. So the report is included in the agenda package tonight. What I'm going to present to you is basically a summary of that. Just as an overview, it is just an analysis of the current service being provided by EPCOR for our water and wastewater, and us bringing it in-house and the difference between those two items. So next slide, please. So right now, we do have a service level agreement that was put in place in 2018. It was previously with our CPC, and of course, upon the sale, EPCOR has taken over that. So right now, EPCOR provides the services for account management, meter reading, billing and collecting, customer service, and after-hours response. The town does continue to have responsibility for following up on arrears and billing error repayments as well. Next slide, please. The SLA expires on December 31st, 2027, but there is a termination clause which allows us to terminate with 12 months notice, which when we get later in the presentation, you'll hear how we've provided that notice to EPCOR now. As many of you are aware, we've done many process improvements and worked very hard with EPCOR as well to ensure that our arrears have reduced significantly. Back in May of 2021, those arrears were in the neighborhood of 230,000, and currently today they're less than 40,000. The new process includes a 60-day warning letter, which tells both tenants and property owners where there are any arrears on the property. And then a secondary notice follows up on the 90 days when it's in arrears for 90 days, where a tax roll happens. So essentially, when we tax roll water arrears, it means that the property owner now takes claim for those water arrears and they get included in their property taxes. So it gives us sort of the same collection power that we have, not sort of, it does give us the same collection power on the water arrears as we have on property taxes, which means eventually, with no payment over 3 years, that it could possibly go into tax sale and be collected in the sale of a home or a property. We've not made it that way or touched that by any stretch of the imagination to date, and don't suspect we will. But it does do a great benefit in terms of keeping those water arrears down. Next slide, please. All right, I need to catch up on my own. So in an effort to gain efficiencies and look at cost effectiveness, town staff were asked to look at bringing water billing in-house quite a while ago. It has been on the books for town staff to look at for a couple of years now. We are now just looking at it, of course, but back in November, a termination notice was provided to EPCOR with an allowance for them to requote the business. I will say that we did receive a requote, and previously our cost for 2023 for this service was at $650,000, and it's been reduced to $520,000. So there's a big savings already at $130,000. In February of 2023, or just in the last couple of weeks, staff of Town of Collingwood did go back to EPCOR and ask them if there was any other reduction that they might be able to provide. We didn't have the answer for the report deadline, but we do know that the quote that they provided was their final offer at this point. Next slide, please. So this slide is a breakdown of the financial analysis that we did. We've done two separate alternatives. One is to continue to issue 12 bills per year. The full financial analysis is included as Appendix C of the report, and it shows a return on the investment of in-house billings of over 3 years at 482%, or a savings of about $426,000. With an annual ongoing savings of nearly $200,000 once we reach year 4. Those first year or two, there is some additional investment for software, some analytic data, as well as an additional person that would be included for 2.5 years. So beginning in year 4, where you see the net savings at $198,000, that is the go-forward amount on an annual basis. And again, this is in comparison to the updated quoted amount at $520,000. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, staff looked at two options. Many municipalities in the area do bill 6 times a year, so every other month. Water utility, or water and wastewater, I should remember to say that, is probably the smallest utility bill that most residents would receive, and is not... It's generally, although today our residents receive it on a monthly basis, receiving it on a bi-monthly basis would change things for them for sure. But staff have committed to continue to providing payment plans where residents would be able to continue to pay on a monthly basis, what we would call a budget plan, which is available to them today as well. The savings, when we look at issuing 6 bills per year, is quite significant. There's a 4-year savings of over $800,000, and the ROI on that return is about 610%. Again, if you look at the annual and ongoing amount, the difference between the updated requote from EPCOR is $300,000 per year on a go-forward basis. Next slide, please. So there are a lot of qualitative benefits, of course, but in terms of annual financial savings and how this might affect the total ratepayer, because as we know, EPCOR's ratepayers are our ratepayers as well. The chart that you're seeing right now shows estimates, very as close as we can get when we're looking at this type of volume of information. And we did speak to staff at EPCOR to help us pull this together a wee bit in terms of what it means when or if the OEB accepts the first $250,000 of the cost that they will continue to have without our water billing. And it was quoted at about 83 cents per month, where that breaks down to about $10 per year for the average residential home. This isn't based on commercial, but purely on residential. The second line of the chart shows the water rate impact based on 6 billings per year. So essentially, it takes us to about 2026 to fully absorb the increase on the hydro side versus the decrease that we would see on the water billing side. While in the 12 billings per year, it would mean till 2027 essentially before we meet and the impact on the user is zero. I think one of the things that we really need to be cognizant of is, and I think I mentioned in the report, or I did mention in the report, that essentially what EPCOR has included as part of their rate application filing at this point is half of the $500,000 in costs that they feel it will cost them to continue to do this work. In the current rate application, with the expectation that when the next rate application happens 5 years from now, that the remainder of the $250,000 gets included. Now, again, that's only if OEB actually accepts these rate increases in the filing at that point. Next slide, please. So again, on the qualitative analysis, I think what from the staff's perspective that we're really looking at is the efficiency gains that can happen by bringing this product or this service in-house. One of the biggest items that we see and what we've been working through especially is the tenants' water arrears that we currently have. Within our own system or the system that we would include to do the billing, property owners would have the ability to receive a copy of their tenant's bill on a bi-monthly or monthly basis, depending on which way we go, which provides them a lot more visibility. I think one of the number one complaints we received from landlords when we started the arrears collections was that they didn't know, that they had no sight line into what their tenants were and weren't paying. Certainly not because of EPCOR's product, just that's the way it was. And of course, we started to try and collect and brought that forward to them. And of course, there were many, many years in some cases where payments hadn't been made at all. So when we moved through the arrears process, one of the biggest items we'd hope to be able to do is to provide our landlords with a copy of that billing as well. Having a one in-house system for utility billing and property taxes allows property owners to receive real-time information on arrears and tax rolled amounts. Today, the information is shared by both EPCOR and the town, and sometimes it can be difficult to manage or navigate for our customers as well as staff because of timing differences. Sometimes the amounts can differ very slightly sometimes, but sometimes a little bit more. So having that one sort of stop shop in terms of understanding what their tax bills are and their utility billing would be very helpful. It's also related to town staff having access to the full meter data set, albeit we do have access to the meter reads. When you're removed from the billing side of it, it makes it a little bit more difficult to troubleshoot the problems we have. And there are certainly some meters that we are having difficulty with that we are working through. Next slide, please. When we receive payments for utility billings, they are directed towards hydro first. That's part of the mandate as a first priority. So oftentimes, especially again, when we go back to arrears, that led to a bit of confusion for our customers, trying to understand that when we did send them a letter and very clearly stated how they needed to make the payment and the requirements, which meant that they did need to call EPCOR or send an email to explain that whatever payments they were making were to be directed to their water and wastewater to avoid the tax rolling of arrears, can be very confusing for our customers. And I think that, in fact, that when we're looking at in terms of interest and things like that, it makes it even more complicated, and they can't quite follow it when they're trying to make payments. The internal process of tax rolling and sort of carrying the torch of arrears collections. EPCOR does provide the initial reminder notices. We take it that extra step to do the 60-day and the 90-day. Is managed by one of the financial analysts. And I think having a utility billing clerk in place to help manage that process would provide a lot more synergy. It would be streamlined, and it would also help the water assistant in environmental services, again, to navigate through meter issues that we have. We'll also have the ability to offer in-person customer service for billing and payment inquiries. Again, a single point of contact for both your water bills and your tax bills. And especially, that's especially important for those people that we tax roll the water billing on a regular basis. Next slide, please. I think I mentioned that one already. More flexibility when working with our customers with long-standing meter issues. There is also the opportunity, and this opportunity exists, whether we continue with EPCOR services or we do bring the water billing in-house, to purchase some further data analytic tools that reduce financial and water losses for broken meters, and it has faster leak detection and resolution as well. There's hands-on control from a billing perspective. We can introduce things like flat rate billing for construction, new base rates where bulk meters are currently billed and could be split, and again, additional assistance in resolving those meter issues with a full in-house team. I think that concludes, oh, pardon me, I missed the one slide. So there are benefits and of continuing to work with EPCOR. And in fairness, I will say that the town staff and staff at EPCOR have worked very well together over the last couple of years. We've worked through some very hard issues, especially the arrears has been a very difficult one. It's difficult to have those conversations with residents, and adding the extra complexity of having to work with EPCOR was, we just collaborated very well. So I think that in the case of a benefit from sticking with EPCOR, our residents and our customers are enjoying and used to receiving that one bill, wastewater and water and hydro all together. And of course, it's environmentally conscious. One bill's going out rather than two for those paper bills that about 70% or 75% of our bills are paper. The cost to produce a combined hydro and wastewater utility for two separate owned utilities, of course, would be captured once rather than delivering the service separately between the town and EPCOR staff. And EPCOR performs the same, or a utility billing service for the same customer base that we're contacting as well. So there's certainly some synergy there, and they do have a large pool of experience as well as some industry expertise that to service the customers. Next slide, please. There we go. I think that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Would there be anyone in the public who would like to speak to this matter? Yes, that's you. Thanks for coming.
Excuse me. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. My name's Tim Hessling. Some of you I met before, some of you I haven't. I'm the Senior Manager of Regulatory Affairs at EPCOR, and obviously new to the local politics arena. I think the last time actually I was in this room was when the sale of Collis was announced. So it's been a few years for sure. So we thought, Darren, myself, my colleague Darren McCrank, and I thought it was important to come in and address this topic as we do feel it's very important for us and for the residents of Collingwood. You know, I think we share a lot of the same comments that Treasurer Quinlan has brought up. Is, you know, we're dealing with the same customers, whether they're ratepayers, taxpayers, tenants, landlords, whatever. It's coming out of the same pocketbook, and we want to make sure we're looking at that as well. We're not of the view that this is of the best interest to the customer, and removing some of the complexities of cost accounting and regulatory rate setting, we do feel like it will lead to increased costs to customers over time. And I have an analogy that I'll use here as well. You know, right now there's a bus that leaves the station each month, and it's reliable and it's got a bus driver, has a bus driver, and there's room on the bus for everyone. whether it's water, electricity, or wastewater. And it uses approximately the same amount of fuel, whether that bus is half full or totally full. And the town has a bus as well that may be cheaper to operate in comparison, but it only has room for some of the people. So there's not room for everyone on it. So instead of having a full bus once a month, citizens end up paying for 2 buses in the long run. To translate that into something a little more practical, in Collingwood with our customer service team, without this water and wastewater billing service, we still need the same team. We still need the same number of customer service reps to answer the phones. So it's really a mutually beneficial agreement, and we've always seen it as such, and that's why it is very important as well. We do feel like the net new costs that will be added, they will come back to customers either through electricity or wastewater rates in the long run, pending OEB approval, of course. And even taking into the account the deferral account as Treasurer Quinlan explained as well. So we feel we can provide a better customer experience. We do actually disagree. We think customers like being billed monthly, and that does help with the arrears process. Over the winter, we do have a lot of customers where the arrears balances will accumulate, as there aren't the same consequences and repercussions to help encourage them to pay on time, and they end up getting in over their heads. We do have an online portal right now that customers can use. It's called Customer Connect. So right now they can have e-billing. They can see their historical bills, their historical usage. And they can also allow landlords to view tenant and customer bills and vice versa. Our portal is being upgraded as well, so we're working to enhance that customer experience. This is in anticipation of the launch of the Green Button Initiative. Some folks might be familiar with that, but this is a provincially mandated tool that allows customers to have more access to their data going forward, their consumption data, to make more informed energy choices. And this could be something the town could consider as well. With its increased AMI energy usage too. It's not currently part of the mandate, but that could be a benefit as well. And we do have plans to increase our online presence. Our response to the town did include an incentive for e-billing, which means if we get more customers to convert online, it's beneficial for everyone, for customers, for the town, and for us as well. We also feel the town would be assuming a lot of additional risk without really a lot of benefit to the ratepayer. A lot of this risk right now is being assumed by EPCOR. Whether this is through the delivery itself of this business case. In our view, this business case is overly aggressive. We do get a lot of phone calls, inquiries, and emails about water and wastewater billing. So it's not an easy portfolio to manage, but we do have a team that's well equipped to do so. There is increased cyber risk associated with managing more customer utility data. Of course, the environmental benefits that were already covered, and customer confusion as well. We feel that since electricity and water and wastewater bills are more, they vary from month to month, it's actually beneficial to have those two pieces of information together on a bill instead of property taxes, where it largely is the same amount each month, except for those 2 great months in November and December where there's nothing. I love those. And we feel like the town is taking on all of this risk without really having a net benefit in the long run to customers as a result. I don't know if there's anything further you wanted to add, Darren, but I think that's all. And I didn't mention this, but I do want to thank Treasurer Quinlan. It's been really great working with her and her team. This is actually the first time we've met in person. But we've interacted a lot over these last few months to deal with these issues, whether it is a billing issue, whether it's a change in process. So we very much appreciate the relationship with the town, and thank you for allowing us to speak tonight.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for coming and sharing your views with us. Okay, so at this point, I will read in the recommendation that staff report T 2023-06 in-house water wastewater utility billing business case analysis be received, and that council direct staff to terminate the agreement with EPCOR for the utility billing service, and this is for water wastewater, and that staff begin preparations to complete the water wastewater billing under the direction of the Treasury Department as soon as is practical, but not before January 1, 2024. So could I have a mover and a seconder, please, for this? Councillor Baines. No seconder? Counselor Doherty?
I'll
Thank you.
second to open the discussion.
Sure. Okay, let's open the discussion. Counselor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. Just to ask if we could please sever out the receipt of the report with the other two directions,
Certainly.
please.
So why don't we deal with the receipt of the report then first? All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Okay, so now we're dealing with the other two items. Who would like to kick off the discussion on this? Okay, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So I think that Treasurer Quinlan is really great at her job, and this is what she should be doing, is finding opportunities for us to consider. It doesn't mean that every time we'll see it the same way. So I guess I just really have one question at this point, and subject to what I hear from my other colleagues, because I know they will have questions, is just that ROI that's been quoted. Is that before or after our additional costs for staffing and the capital in that?
Yes, go
I
ahead.
may, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Jeffrey, that ROI is inclusive of all costs. So that's over the 3 years where you see that original capital expense and then the ongoing cost for the staff.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So through the chair too. I guess the other thing is, there's just no. I mean, of course, right. There's only one taxpayer, one ratepayer. They're all the same. So if we're creating a cost for them on one side and have no way to offset it on the other, I wondering if you could speak to that a bit, because I do have a concern creating a cost on one side if we don't have the ability, because they're two different utilities, to create an offset somehow for the.
If I may, Your Worship, through
Yes,
you to
please
Councillor
do.
Jeffrey. So I think, I guess to start off, what EPCOR believes that their remaining costs will be is about 500,000 per year. What we're saying is that in fact we can do it for a wee bit less. I do have experience in this. We had the water billing in Wasaga Beach was done in house with this level of staff. In fact, with less staff than what we're proposing here, with the exact same software module. Similar types of clients. I would say a little bit more complicated here because we do have some industrial, which was not present in the beach, and also a similar, maybe more commercial here as well. So what we've forecasted in terms of the costs is less than what EPCOR is saying. Now, I do think that part of that is because there are things that can't be eliminated on a go-forward basis. And similar to what EPCOR would have in terms of cross charges across their organizations or their lines of business, we have those same types of situations. So right now, in our water rate supply, for example, there is a portion of my time, a portion of Director Slama's time, a portion of the manager McGinnity's time that gets split between water, wastewater, and in my cases from taxes as well. So there are those types of things that are already sort of inherent in the rate. And I suspect, I don't know this for certain, but I suspect that a similar type of exercise happens in EPCOR's world as well. So I would think that the 500,000 that they're including as the final costs would include those allocations too. The actual point of that 500,000, though, what I can say is that the regulatory body, the OEB, that would allow them to bring that full cost back in may not happen. They may not allow the full cost to be absorbed. I don't know that. I don't think anybody can say either way. The first 250,000 is being proposed in the current rate regulation. And then the second 250,000 would go in the, rate filing, I should say, not rate regulation. And the second portion would go in beginning in 2028. So if you look at the chart that we had as financial, I think it's the third slide for financial analysis in the presentation, you can see that it does take us some time to meet that first hump, I will say. So the 83 cents per month per consumer, or the $10 per month we said would remain as cost for EPCOR. It takes us till 2026, or sorry, the third year, to meet that as a savings. Because, of course, in the first couple of years, we have some initial costs. We have the cost of purchasing the software. The maintenance continues, of course. Taking the data that's currently in the Harris system and bringing that into our system is included in that cost as well. So it does take a few years for us to meet that. And again, we don't know for 100% that $250,000 will be accepted in their rate filing that's just there today. We also don't know that in 2028 that rate filing would be accepted as well, so that full $500,000 would be accepted. So I can hear EPCOR's point that it is all one payer. We're all one taxpayer. We're all one ratepayer. We're sharing in that, most certainly. I think where it gets a little bit more difficult to explain is how we put a dollar amount on the synergies that would be gained and the increase in the types of rates that we may be able to collect when we have the full analysis and it's at our fingertips, and we are more in tune or closer to the information than I think we are today.
Yes, go ahead.
One last follow-up. And if for any reason council didn't decide to do this now, there's nothing stopping us a year from now saying, I think, we're not limited to this one consideration. Is that correct?
If I may, Your Worship, Councillor Jeffrey, that's correct. And I would also say that the exercise in itself has brought $130,000 of savings so far, too. So it's a positive as well.
Thank you. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Your Worship, to Treasurer Quinlan. I'm generally in support of this because the numbers, if they're accurate, speak for themselves. However, I do have pause to reflect for EPCOR's point about cybersecurity. And so my question to you is, has that been figured into this financial equation? And have you costed that for the town in regard to the integrity of the database?
I may, Your Worship, to Councillor Baines. So we haven't added any additional costs for cybersecurity. We do have an insurance plan that covers cybersecurity. I think one of the things that we already sort of have that inherent risk in the sense of our property taxes and what we provide or what we are provided from MPAC, for example. That data comes in similar, maybe not as frequent, as to how the transmitted meter data will come in as well. So that risk is already there. The system is already there. We have the actual financial system is already in place. This is just an additional module that would collect the data. We sort of assume some of that risk already because our people in environmental services manage the actual meter reads in the sense that they analyze and try and troubleshoot problems where we have for meters. So we're already accessing the data. It's just not being inputted into our financial system. So I don't see it as a huge additional risk. But certainly we could look into whether our cybersecurity today insurance portion covers that.
Thank you. And just a follow-up,
Yes.
if I might. You touched upon the data collection. And remind me of, do each of my, both the electric meter and the water meter have an electronic transponder, or is there an individual reading each meter? I don't ever remember seeing one.
No, you're absolutely right, Councillor Baines. It is a transmitter that's attached to your water meter, and also I think it's actually built in your hydro meter, so it's not a separate piece that electronically transmits the information to a repository actually held in Mississauga.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. I will admit that I'm very conflicted on this. I mean, certainly the savings that we're seeing here that are projected, are, quite substantial. On the other hand, the synergies that we currently benefit from by continuing with EPCOR. And the found savings, the guaranteed, the bird in the hand, as it were, of $130,000 a year gives me great confidence that, you know, we win regardless. So I guess I'm leaning a little bit more toward not supporting this recommendation, at least for today. But the other thing that I will say is if we have managed to find these kinds of savings, then I wonder if working together, if additional savings can be found for both organizations. Those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Fryer?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. Is it possible to bring that slide up, the one that Treasurer Quinlan referred to, that compared the about 5 years, I think? I'd like to look at it again. That's the first time I saw it. When I looked at the presentation that we were forwarded, it only had a few slides on it. So I would like to look at that. But I'm also going to repeat what already has been said. Treasurer Quinlan's done an excellent job looking into a high cost of a particular service, and the reward of that is right off the top $130,000 in savings, and that's much appreciated for certain. Good work. So the one that I was hoping to look at was the one that just so if you just slide through. It'll be the one with the 3 lines on it. That's the one there. Could you just center that a little better? Perfect. Okay. So I agree with you that it does show in 2026 that it catches up. If you go to 6 billings, and I'm not supportive of going to 6 billings. So the way this chart's done, and correctly so, is anticipating $250,000 of recovery built into that first rate application that's just going to be approved. And then the assumption is that in 2028, it may be a doubling because that other 250 would be approved. The other concern for me is that we saw from the cost charts from EPCOR in their rate application that they were actually looking at $775,000 of cost per year. They came down to 500 as far as a charge goes, but I'm still thinking that they're going to have to find a way to absorb that other $275,000. And it may not be on rates, but it could be in service or capital investment or those types of things. So I'm concerned about that as well. I wanted to ask about the online part of things because I do have a concern. When you're looking at your costs, are you looking at it based on your experiences with dealing with recoveries right now and questions right now? Have you built in anything, because currently right now, obviously, EPCOR staff are probably handling a number of questions on water. So I'm assuming that you've built in some assumption on increased volume of questions.
If I may, Your Worship, through you
ahead.
to the Deputy Mayor. So as part of having the billing clerk and the junior billing clerk, I'll call them, they would handle or field a number of calls within the Treasury Department. We do have a sort of shared responsibility to answer calls. We also have customer service staff that are here as well. That would also field those calls too. And emails, for the most part, I would say, would end up being handled by the water billing clerk here. I know that currently the environmental services clerk over in water and wastewater already deals with emails as well. In fact, she's our contact sometimes as we're working with the EPCOR team to try and resolve some issues. So the costs are included, and some are I would say for the shared responsibility for answering the phone in the Treasury Department. it would be slight, since we would have a billing clerk, especially if there was a 6 times per billing per year. It would free up those other months to handle those increased calls.
Can I do a follow-up, please? We had in the in-camera session, I'm concerned about the electronic payment people. I understand that we have access to customer data. I just can't see how you can transfer someone who's agreed to electronic payment at the electric side, that includes the water and wastewater right now, how that information can be transferred over with password and everything like that and just automatically set up. So have you, I couldn't remember if I'd asked at the time if you could look into that and verify that it could be done. I just don't, as I say, right now, there's a electronic payment approval for a customer sitting at EPCOR that includes their utility bill. I don't know if you can bring that over and automatically set it up and say, now you're going to have your water utility bill coming out of that account.
I may, Your Worship,
go
through you
ahead.
to the Deputy Mayor. So just in reference, so it's not passwords and things that are associated with that. So pre-authorized payments that are set up at EPCOR, we have a similar situation where we have pre-authorized payments here as well. So I suspect what we would do is send a notice first to request that, would you agree to us continuing with your pre-authorized payment? For those taxpayers that already have their pre-authorized payment or their account information with us, we would collect the data from our side and confirm that that's what indeed they would like us to do. But I suppose we would send a notice first to the subscriber requesting that they confirm that the information with EPCOR is correct, or we would ask them to refill in an online form that said, please provide us with your account information. And of course, we'd need their email addresses as well when it comes to e-billing, for example, if that was the case. But for a PAP, it is account information for sure. It's bank account information. So we would have to send a notice, and that's part of the setup, and having that junior clerk helping us through that transition.
You have a follow-up?
Just some comment now. EPCOR, Collingwood Public Utilities, has provided water and wastewater billing since their inception. And when combined with electric, the in-house analysis, I believe, shows that there's savings for both the taxpayer and ratepayer by keeping them combined. I expect some very integral partnership work with EPCOR in the coming years as electrification needs of the municipality for ultra important matters such as reducing our carbon footprint and the green button mentioned earlier are going to escalate exponentially. EPCOR has strongly indicated that they want to maintain this shared service partnership for billing by reducing charges by 20%. They have expectations of further reductions, possibly, as they talked about again with the green button program. I support giving EPCOR the opportunity to do their work. This would best recognize their efforts to continue to work together, and I think that's a very good message going forward. I understand Treasury's identified some shortcomings with the collection process for water arrears that is currently being utilized, and I just say again that I know as a board member of Centre Wellington Hydro that those problems aren't as evident for that municipality. I'm hoping that a major factor in a challenging period of collection may have again been one of the hurdles of COVID that was caused. So hopefully there'll be some reduced problems on their own. We've already heard about the very successful work in reducing the overall arrears substantially. And again, great work by Treasury. As I noted formally in conjunction with Public Utilities before its dissolution in 2015, in that case, the consultant indicated a $700,000 a year annual amount of saving. In my analysis, the outcome of that is there was no savings, just increased costs. So if this was going to be moving forward, then I'd hope that we could get some sort of a update on if I'm incorrect in thinking that there wasn't any savings in that major change and decision, because I do believe that overall this will cost more to do the service when you consider taxpayer and ratepayer impacts. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Well, I'll just say I take a slightly different view. It seems to me that the town should bill for the services it provides. And I don't know why we would pay a premium for another company to bill for a service we provide. And certainly EPCOR, as we know, was Collis in a previous life and ownership, and it was owned by the town. So again, it was sort of, I could see why it made sense for the billing of town electricity to be billed together with town water and wastewater. But EPCOR is now a separate business, and to me, whether, yes, we're going to have billing with our property taxes and our water and wastewater under the report we have today, all things that we're responsible for, and we will collect and deal with it under the guidance of our treasurer. I feel that we do have some efficiencies here in our Treasury Department, and we've seen in the last year, reduction of a staff, and we know Treasurer Quinlan's dealt with these kind of billings before in Wasaga because, as I say, if a municipality is providing the service, they should have the on-hands ability to fix problems and bill it and collect it without any intervening need to deal with another company. So anyway, that's my view on the matter. So I'll be voting in support of the staff report. Thank you. Okay, so we've had lots of discussion. So then all those in favor of the report in front of us tonight? Oh, did I miss something? Yeah, go ahead.
We severed, so can we just read the...
Want me to read it again?
Thank you.
Sure. The part that we'd severed says as follows, and that council directs staff to terminate the agreement with EPCOR for the utility billing service, this is for water and wastewater, and that staff begin preparations to complete the water wastewater billing under the direction of the Treasury Department as soon as is practical, but not before January 1, 2024. Do we have to have a new mover? No. Okay. No, we have a mover and a seconder. Yeah. Okay. So ready to vote? Okay. All those in favor? And those opposed? So it is a tie vote, so it fails. So this will come again before us at council. And maybe we'll have Councillor Ring back. Okay. Thank you, everyone. All right, the next item on the agenda, we'll go back to the staff reports in the order they are, is 6.1. And it's 2023-11, Procedural Bylaw and Governance Structure Review. So is this Clerk Almas? Yes, Clerk Almas is going to take us through this tonight.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of the Standing Committee. I can speak to this report like the back of my hand. We have been through the procedural bylaw several times, but I want you to know that it is a living document and it does change and it is flexible to council's needs. So reviewing it regularly makes sense. So we'll start our presentation. We'll go to our first slide. So the purpose of this report was to address 3 different requests that came forward through notice of motion and approved by council to review. So number 1, looking at the governance structure and considering a committee of the whole structure, looking at our meeting schedule, and looking at agenda publishing times. Next slide. So section 1 is reviewing the governance structure. It is important to bear in mind that council has a very broad mandate for the provision of critical services to a community. Council relies heavily on staff within different departments for professional and expert advice related to the technical, financial, administrative, legal, and process issues, to include a few. In addition, council also relies on advice from the very broad range of stakeholders, volunteers, interest groups, and its citizens. There are 3 governance structures that we've examined in the report that are common amongst municipalities. Slide. Reviewing governance structures, the following themes have been collected during previous governance reviews, and they are categorized within the design driver characteristics. First of all is strategy, the need for better understanding of council vision, goals, and objectives. Its structure, the need for enhanced access to council and council engagement and reporting structure requires clarity and reporting opportunities. Process involves training and education opportunities for members, the importance of communication flow, as well as chair development and enhanced accountability. There's people practices, which includes the value of community participation to be retained and respect for council staff and the public as time is all valued, and the rewards aspects. So a high value is being placed on community participation and engagement, and the feeling that service is valued, fulfilling, and recognized, and the belief that council is both listening and responding to their input and advice. Next slide is our current structure. So you're quite familiar with our current structure. We currently have in place 3 standing committees, and at each of our standing committees, you can register as a deputation, or you can participate unregistered as a delegation and report into our standing committees. And then we generally have our 2 weeks before it's reviewed at council, in which more opportunity for public input can be acquired at that time for public registration too as a deputation at a council meeting. So this model is what we do have in place. Standing committee does make recommendations to council, and it is important to note that the standing committee does not have delegated decision-making powers. So the standing committees do have to report into council, and it's council that has the ultimate authority, which is good information for the public to be aware of with regards to governance processes. So we move on to our next slide. Standing committee structure, the benefits and opportunities. Each standing committee can champion the recommended initiatives, services, programs when the matter is before full council for consideration. It divides up the very broad range of council responsibilities into specialized areas of interest. Council members become particularly with a particular interest in an area can become proficient, thereby developing and providing valuable resource to assist council in its decision making. And not all department heads are required at standing committees, causing greater staff efficiencies. Some of the challenges or weaknesses with the current structure is the jurisdiction of a standing committee may cross lines with other standing committees. There are occasions that standing committee access to all department heads is important regardless of the standing committee reporting structure, and more committee meetings to manage and less flexibility for scheduling. If a report is not finalized by agenda publishing timelines, then the matter has to be held to the following month. Our next slide. I'm just highlighting some of the most significant challenges and disadvantages of the various structures. In the staff report, we do have a detailed list of the broad range of advantages and disadvantages. So option B is looking at the committee of the whole structure. So committee of the whole meetings are intended to be less formal meetings of council to discuss matters and become fully informed. Committee of the whole cannot approve reports for action. They can refer reports to staff for further information or recommend the report be referred to council for final consideration and ratification or approval. The common committee of the whole structure includes alternating regular council and committee whole meetings with every other week, with or without additional committees and boards. The strength of this model is that all members of council have the ability to debate at the committee of the whole meeting, and matters can be more thoroughly reviewed prior to council consideration. A proposed meeting schedule will be provided later in the presentation when we discuss how those options can look if council approves a committee of the whole structure. Next slide. Benefits and opportunities. The two most significant advantages of moving to committee of the whole system are it allows more opportunities to have items advanced to council if the item cannot be accommodated on the dedicated standing committee. As previously noted, this avoids delays of planning matters, corporate policy changes, etc., and can help balance out the meetings more effectively. And it does allow all members to participate in the more detailed discussion and presentation deliberations of each matter. For example, if we were reverted back to the standing committee structure where we had 5 members of council present, the more detailed presentations happened at the standing committee level, and thereby if you were not sitting on that standing committee whenever it came to council, you would not have the full benefit unless you participated either watching from the gallery or participating online and listening to that presentation, or watching the recording that is available following the meetings. Next slide. The whole structure, benefits and opportunities continued. The number of meetings can be consolidated. The opportunity for public and community stakeholders to have direct involvement in the details of matters being considered. Deputants and delegations can present to all members of council in the committee of the whole. That was one of the struggles that we often heard whenever we were registering deputants for standing committees, is that they didn't want to speak to 5 members of council. They wanted to speak to all of council. Members of council become more familiar with all aspects of municipal business. Boards could also report into a committee of the whole, allowing more appropriate informal discussion at this level. Another example of this is we do have the library board and the police service board actually report directly into council, whereas, for example, the business improvement area reports into the corporate and community services standing committee. The benefit of that is they're making some significant recommendations pertaining to municipal assets or municipal downtown, and it allows a little bit more informal opportunity for the public to participate in those conversations as well, as we noted with the gateway feature last year. The weaknesses of a committee of the whole structure is there's no opportunity for members of council to specialize in a particular area of interest. Increase onus on public to review committee of the whole agendas to understand when matters of interest will be addressed. So some participants right now can register on our iCompass portal for our agendas, and if they have a particular interest in development or planning applications, then they register and they get the notifications for those committee meetings, whereas they would have to pay attention to all of the committee of the whole notifications should that be recommended. Increased risk to debate matters at committee meeting or at council meetings to replicate the debate that took place at a committee of the whole. Perception that when a matter is approved by committee of the whole, that it will be automatically approved by council. Next slide. Looking at the governance structure, if we looked at a committee of the whole structure, right now that we have indicated that the first Monday of the month could be reserved for in-camera meetings when they're necessary, and the second and fourth meetings of the month be dedicated for a council meeting that could begin at 2:00 to ratify the committee of the whole decisions from the previous committee of the whole meeting, and then have the new committee of the whole matters be presented following that council. We've suggested the second Monday and the fourth Monday. It was brought to our attention today that does align with the county schedule. So there was no specific reason on picking the second or fourth. It could be the first or the third. But we'd like to recommend at least 2 weeks between each meeting to allow the opportunity to receive either additional information to be added to staff reports that may have come from the committee of the whole meeting, or to include any additional amendments that were requested at the meeting or from members of the public. The next options that we investigated was looking at a structure that would have the first and second Monday of the month committee of the whole, and the fourth Monday of the month being a council meeting. The most significant concern with this structure is that we're limited to one council meeting a month. And generally, that's where you're making your decisions. That's when bylaws have to be passed. And the concern being, we would like to, we foresee that there would be much more opportunity or desire to have special meetings of council to ratify things or approve items that need actual council consideration. And then we also examined having it, the committee of the whole, on the first 2 Mondays, and the third and fourth being the council. And again, the benefit of having that spread out, the 2 councils at the end of the month, we find it right now that there is a little bit of a challenge because the 2 council meetings are at the end of the month. So if any matters do come forward, we'd either have to have a special meeting of council earlier in the month to accommodate that. So to spreading it out makes it a little bit more equal opportunity and not a lot of delay should matters need to be addressed by council. Next item, option C, council with only public advisory committees and boards. This is not recommended. This historically was how councils operated in the past. The recommendation is not to proceed with this primarily because it is very important, as you can see, to have a lot of the deliberations a little bit more informal. You need to have the public involvement as much as possible, and it was very limited under this type of a structure. Also, as noted in the report, a municipalities' responsibilities are much more complex than they used to be, and having that opportunity for more deliberation is more important since actually I think I would say the most recent changes to the Municipal Act in 2001. Section 2 spoke to the meeting schedule. So based on whatever council recommends for the governance structure, we could consider the accommodation of the request to avoid significant school holidays. So the 2 in particular that were identified were the holiday break between December 24th and January 6th. There has to be some consideration to the flexibility of the school board. Sometimes the holidays don't necessarily align exactly, so we would have to take a look at that. But if council supports avoiding this holiday break as well as the March break holiday break, we would bring back in the following report for council's consideration the amended meeting schedule. The next item that we were asked to investigate is the agenda publishing timeline. This is a little bit more complicated, as reports are generally vetted at department heads 2 weeks prior to the publication of the agenda. There can often be important reports that require our final vetting the Tuesday immediately prior to the deadline of these agendas, and it can be quite challenging to meet a Tuesday deadline should any changes to the staff reports be required and final approvals obtained. Earlier publishing has generally resulted in a significant increase in the amount of addendums issued to accommodate late submissions not able to meet the publishing deadline, or other significant matters that have come up after the agenda was published that are unable to be postponed to the next regular meeting. Out of the 39 regular standing committees and council agendas issued between November 30th, 2020 and July 2021, approximately 23 addendums were issued, and in some cases, multiple addendums issued for one meeting. This can not only be frustrating for council and standing committee members, but also for the public, as they may not have been aware of the addendum and missed something that may be significant to them or not be provided the time to review the matter in detail. So what is being proposed here, the current process is that the agendas be published 4 days in advance of the meeting. So right now they're published, actually in a procedure bylaw, we use hours. So council can decide to change the meeting dates to another day instead of Monday. I do understand and respect that if we do have a holiday that falls on a Monday, we have a meeting on Tuesday. But for ease of the public to understand, we're using the days versus the hours for the purpose of this report, but it would be defined in the procedural bylaw. So currently we're required to publish 4 days in advance, which is Thursday, prior to a Monday meeting. and the request, and we'll get into that request. We look at 6 days moving forward. So our next slide. So option 1 is recommended. 6 days is a little bit more difficult, and what we're recommending is the current practice of Wednesdays. Sorry, the current practice is Thursdays, but council had requested staff to be look at publishing as early as Wednesday. So we have been accommodating Wednesdays, I think, since the request came, with the exception, unfortunately, of last week. But we believe that Wednesday can be accommodated moving forward. To request 6 days in advance, which is option 2, we would actually recommend publishing the agendas 2 days or 2 Fridays in advance. It's a little bit more difficult to publish on the Tuesday following a council meeting day, as well as the agendas and staff reports are reviewed on the Tuesdays generally as well. So if council would like to support at least the 6 day, we would have to adjust calendars, and we would support issuing it 2 Fridays prior to a Monday meeting. And the last option, draft agendas with and without full reports. So this is also an option. It's the finalizing of staff reports that can cause some delays. So we could issue a agenda to members of council a minimum of 6 days in advance. We could provide it as early as the Thursday prior to 2 Thursdays in advance of a Monday meeting. The benefit of this is that members of council would at least be aware of the content that was going to be on the agenda. So if you had constituents that were very interested in a topic, you could advise them. They could meet the deadline to apply for a deputation if they wanted to register to get to be afforded the 10 minutes as a deputation. And then the full report with the full agenda with full reports could be published on the Wednesday prior to the Monday meeting. Staff recommendations. So staff are recommending consideration of a committee of the whole council structure with recommended meeting schedule being implemented on a pilot basis. I believe the recommendation we put forward is following the summer break to evaluate how the committee of the whole structure has been working. Number 2, based on what council decides for the governance structure, we would bring forward the rescheduling of meetings to avoid the major school holidays and publishing timelines. Again, we would recommend moving forward with 5 days in advance of a regular meeting with an agenda management list posted to the website. Example, Wednesdays for a meeting the following Monday. So I should note too, department heads and managers manage an agenda management list. So that agenda management list, we also had noted, could be published on the public website, so the public is aware of generally what is anticipated to come forward. So they have a time frame. It does change, obviously, depending on what council prioritizes, depending on when information becomes available, depending on applications and commenting agencies providing information for various reports. So that schedule does change, but we recommend that that agenda management list be posted publicly on the website just to provide a little bit more transparency to items that are coming forward. That's it.
That's great. Thank you. Would there be any members of the public who wish to address this? Don't think I see anybody in the gallery. And do you see anyone on your screen there, Clerk Gomez?
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have one attendee. If you would like to address the staff report, please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. Not at this time, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. So I'll read in the recommendation here. The staff report C 2023-11, procedural bylaw and governance structure review be received, and that council hear and support the following. 1, committee of the whole / council structure. 2, that a pilot to the frequency and timing of meetings be undertaken until the end of the summer break to ensure business can be accomplished within the recommended frequency and meeting times as described in Section 1, Option B. 3. Changes to the meeting schedule based on recommended structure to avoid regular meeting dates on Christmas and March breaks, and ensuring that there is allowance for a 1-hour break between meetings held on the same day. 4. That agendas be published 5 days in advance and an agenda management list be posted on the website showing items anticipated for upcoming meetings. And that the council direct staff prepare a revised annual calendar based on the meeting schedule changes, and that the necessary bylaw be drafted to enact the recommended changes to the procedural bylaw to be effective May 2023 or sooner. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Fryer and Councillor Houston. Thank you. Open the floor for comments, questions. Okay, Councillor Jeffrey.
Nobody else wants to go first. This was a lot of work through you to the clerk, and I really appreciate that. You know, I went through this whole thing when we first brought in the standing committees, and things change sometimes. But in this case, I kind of think I say tomato, you say tomato. I see a lot of similarities between the two processes. Originally, the standing committee gave council members the one Monday off. The committee of the whole structure anticipates one Monday, I think, in the recommended option, that they would have one Monday off. So I guess that really the only differences are that instead of 5 members, you have all 9. But I have to tell you, this has been grueling, having 2 meetings with all 9 people in a meeting. It takes a lot of time to process this. And as an aside, I also have a concern that I know the timelines for the community-based strategic plan, but we are pushing through a lot of really big items without the lens of a new engagement or an updated engagement with our public. So I do have a concern as to how many major things are coming up and how we don't have that updated perspective. In terms of the agendas for a committee of the whole, when we said things would for the people looking at the agenda to see what they were interested in, could we categorically still set out an agenda as to what was our development and operations items, our corporate community items, so people could maybe narrow it down a lot more quickly? I know it would have to be done kind of within, whether it's a staff report or whether it's I'm not sure how that would work, but just anything that in an agenda structure that would help people familiarize themselves more quickly. And I want to say, sometimes if you're the only one doing it or one of few doing it, doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're rare. And so if it works for your community, it works. And if it's time for us to change, then so be it. I really feel like public participation is down, with the exception of the public meetings and planning. And I do know one of our decisions for the standing committees was because people who are not active with council as much and has something they want to bring to our attention, it was more comfortable for them to come in that relaxed process, but also with only 5 members. It wasn't as intimidating to have the whole council staring down at them in terms of being able to come. And I do feel as a whole, public participation has been down in terms of our committee stuff. In terms of the elections of the chair that was proposed in terms of committee of the whole, I don't know if it's an actual election or it just seemed a little willy-nilly to me when I read the staff report that we weren't coming into anything certain. For me, I would like to know that in that committee of the whole, we were going to have that annual election of a chair to provide that opportunity to other council members to build on their chairing abilities.
Maybe that's a question for Clerk Almas. Was that your intention, Clerk Almas?
I don't mean willy-nilly. It just means I probably didn't read it right, but I just wanted
I thought there was going to be election, but I think, yeah.
Thank you, Worship. I'll tell you, I finished this as noted 2 weeks before because I was away on vacation last week. So I haven't even seen the final version. I went through it today, so maybe I'll have CAO Skinner just confirm that if there was any modifications to that section.
Thank you. Through the chair, I believe that it talks about that would be a flexibility that's available to council should you wish to have a rotating chair or a periodic election of a chair intended to develop members and give everyone experience in the chairship, and also maybe to take some of the burden off having one person chair all the meetings throughout the year. Thank you.
Thank you for that response, CO. So I guess what I'm saying is I would like to see something fixed so that absolutely does occur. And I think that's all I had at the point until we're in committee. So if I think of something else, I can ask.
You can. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Fryer.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I have a couple of questions and then just some comment. So I agree. I think it made sense that we reviewed this with 6 new members coming in for this new term. I favored going and putting my support behind option 1 of other options, which was 2 committee of the wholes for 2 weeks and a council, one council. So having the gap week, but I'm not opposed to the change to go to. It reads committee of the whole / council. And that might be where some of the confusion came, but if I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this, council would be meeting first, dealing with the committee of the whole from 2 weeks prior, and then going through committee of the whole matters for council in 2 weeks. That's correct, right? So it's just the way it reads. It makes it sound like committee of the whole would be first. And you've stated that there would be a 2:00 start, and then it would just move into committee of the whole at the chair's decision, right? Like, so that we might have a half an hour or that, but generally, depending on how the meeting's gone, it should just flow into the committee of the whole. So I had the concern that that was quite a change to the current format, but I do like what you spoke about, which was there's a notification process that you can sign up for on the webpage, where people can be notified when the meeting agenda comes out. You're talking about putting out the meeting agenda as far as items in the future agenda at an earlier date. So I'm really pleased with that. And you're also talking about posting that meeting list on the webpage. So those are both ways to make sure that something doesn't fall through the cracks and somebody misses something. I do, somewhat selfishly, prefer the first and third week if we're going with council and committee of the whole, because as was pointed out, we, the mayor, myself, and alternate Jeffries, possibly have council the next day if we're going with the second and the fourth. So I'd be supportive of it being the first and the third. And I'm supportive of the annual election of chair if that's what the mayor would like. I felt all along in this first year, the mayor would be getting familiar with things so much. It was appropriate for her to be chairing all the meetings. But it is a task, and so if after a year, the mayor feels that it's something that she wants to go through and possibly step away from. So, just again from a general statement, I think the initial temporary decision to have all members of council participate from the outset of this new term was the best one. Based on what has come before council over these past few months, I can't imagine not being a full participant would have prepared me or allowed me to participate in any way better. Council committee as a whole is recommended, as I said. I'm supportive of that. I would like to see if we could schedule it for first and third. I agree with the pilot study approach, and the timing that you've talked about is introducing it in May to give the public a chance to understand the change in process. I agree with the possible Christmas and March break adjustments in Section 3, and I support the 5-day target. So I think the only other there was a spot in the report that said deputations generally to council, or maybe delegations generally to council. There'd still be deputations ability at the committee of the whole level, and even to the point where somebody can address, as we ask in every one of these staff reports, if there's anybody who would want to say anything. Correct?
Yes, go ahead, Thomas.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. That is correct. That was being proposed to avoid, if people were registered as a deputation, to know which time it was going to be started, since the committee of the whole would be a fluid time. That's why that was scheduled that way. But we would still be recommending the unregistered delegations, and we could definitely do deputations at that meeting as well. But if somebody wanted some clear structure on a time frame, we could provide it at council.
And just one follow-up then, in camera. I think we have a gap week, so there's always the possibility that if there's some planned in camera, you can work towards that. But in the event that that something came up that had to be dealt with, would the generally would it be before the council meeting, so a little earlier in the afternoon?
Clerk Almas, have you given that thought?
Certainly. Thank you, Worship. It's recommended to be on an alternate date. I think the concern is if we met, for example, earlier in the day, depending on what the matter is.
Exactly.
If it's something that is a very quick matter, we potentially could start a meeting at 1 o'clock. We could do potentially a morning meeting. We just didn't want to have an overwhelming day. So that's, if council supports having the structure with the second and fourth, or the first and third, then we would have flexibility of using one of the other alternate Mondays specific to special meetings for in-camera purposes.
So, Mayor Hamlin, I'd like to wish or to listen to others, but when it comes time to vote, I would try to make an amendment to the suggestion of the first and third weeks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Baines.
Through you, Chair Hamlin, to the clerk, as someone new to this process, can you explain to me how it is that the committee of the whole won't become almost the committee of everything and be much longer meetings than, say, these ones are, the SICS or DNO or whatever, with everything packed into it? How is it, practically speaking, that we get through more efficiently?
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. The biggest advantage is we have the opportunity to prepare our agenda management list and balance out the comprehensive staff reports better. Because right now, if all of the items that are strategic initiatives, so significant corporate items, are coming to committee of the whole at the same time, and same as development and operations, as you've witnessed, development and operations reports, sometimes those agendas can get you regularly into the 5th hour of meeting. And if we have this opportunity, we think that we can balance it out a little bit more, but hence one of the reasons why we've adopted a pilot solution to see if that is actually going to be our reality.
Thank you. And for a follow-up question, I assume that the time gap between a committee of the whole and a council meeting is to allow for, quote, sober second thought of council members, whereby they may have decided since the committee of the whole decision that they may not be, in fact, at that point, in support of the same motion that they might have passed then.
Go ahead, Clerk Almas.
Certainly, and I know that it looks like CEO Skinner may want to jump in on this one too, but that's exactly correct. Just because something is approved at committee of the whole doesn't mean it's going to be ratified at the council meeting. You can do your own diligence. You can speak to your own constituents, and it may influence you to vote a different way. So yes, that extra 2-week period gives members of council that opportunity that may have voted one way and find out that maybe they would have supported something another way.
Thank you. No further questions.
Theo Skinner, do you want to add something?
I just wanted to add, thank you, through the chair, that the time gap I think you're speaking about is the 2-week time gap. Just that nobody would get confused. They were going to vote the same day at.
Right.
Thank you.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support the staff recommendation in its entirety. I was very enthusiastic about the notion of standing committees when we first introduced them, because it really, as you described it, gave an opportunity to focus in particular areas and for members of that committee to concentrate and become an expert on the subject matter. But what I've been finding more recently is that the two committees, corporate and community development and development and operations, have become sort of out of balance in terms of the complexity of the materials that we're covering. So the notion of spreading out the material across a committee of a whole structure, I think would be beneficial in terms of our ability to deal with the matters in front of us and also to deal with them in a timely manner. The only thing that I would offer is that pending the mayor's approval, I think the whole notion of rotating chairs for the committee of the whole would be advantageous for the development of all of members of council. So that would be something that I would also support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else have questions or comments on the report? I'll just say I do support the report and appreciate all the effort that's gone into coming up with this new approach. I feel that the Christmas and March break, I know I've spoken on this previously, but I really would like our council to be seen as family friendly for our council members and those who might run in the future. So I'm very supportive of that. I have long been a proponent of having the agenda come out a week early. But I am happy with the other things that have been put in here. What I haven't liked is agendas coming out on Thursday evening. So literally there's one business day for our public and ourselves to sort of get a sense of what's on the agenda and really no time to talk to anyone. But I think having a draft agenda registered a week ahead, everyone will be able to see what's coming up and, start to think about things. And if there is an agenda management list, so we can see, 2 months from now, maybe we're going to deal with such and so. I think that'll take a lot of the mystery out of, what's happening, and we'll have more than a day's notice. So I was happy with all of that. I did have a question about how, we're going to, under this concept, start our council at 2 with committee of the whole to follow after a break. And I'm wondering if there's enough time starting at 2, what time we'll be running into. And I think my question then is, how long are council meetings generally? Is this something you're able to tell us about?
Certainly, under the standing committee structure, again, because not all members of council were present, there was generally a little bit more debate that occurred. So including, I believe, including in-camera meetings was generally up to 3 hours. But if all members are present and we move in-camera meetings to an alternate date, that could be consolidated potentially.
Okay. All right. So that would be great. Because I do want to have that bit of a break between the meetings. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. There was one thing that I didn't mention, and I'm just going to bring this forward, not necessarily on offer for this immediate change, but something to be considered. And that is a notion of changing the day of the meetings from Monday to a day later in the week, like Tuesday or Wednesday. And the reason why I'm suggesting that is to encourage more younger adults who are working full-time job, may have families in the home. I think for all of us, I can say that our Sundays are completely devoted to reviewing our agendas for Mondays, takes away from our family time. And so to move the meetings into midweek would allow members of council to enjoy the weekend with their families in their entirety and concentrate on the work during the work week. Just a thought, not something I'm necessarily recommending, or not something that I am recommending for today, but I would like us to consider this at some time in the not too distant future.
Yeah, thanks for raising that. I have to say I do think about that sometimes as well. So they're probably something we should, see if others are interested in. Councillor Jeffrey.
Hi, thank you. I did think of a couple other things, but just in response to Councillor Doherty, I'm running my own business, and to take another different day out of the middle of the week won't make any difference. I still have to use Sunday to review because I can't afford a day during the week off of my business to review things during the day. So it won't make a difference to me. It will make it harder on me, but I'll be using Sunday either way. So I just also wanted to ask about, or just to also comment, I heard 1 o'clock floated around, again, for self-employed people who have to work over and above, because council doesn't give you a living wage, that the more you encroach into my billable hours, days, or my workable hours during the day, then the more difficult it gets for me. And I think the more difficult it will get to engage younger people, because if they are working during the day, you're only going to get them during evening hours. You're not going to get them during the day. The other question I had out of interest was, because I haven't had kids in school for a long time, do the March breaks between public and Catholic school boards align?
Well, in my experience, and I'll just pop in, I think, I'm sorry, I was going to answer a slightly different question. So I'm going to turn this over to Clerk Almas. Thank you.
Thank you. I know from a crossing guard perspective and being responsible for that, they don't always align. So we'd have to take a look at it each calendar year. But for the most part, when it comes to significant holidays, it would usually be if there's a PA day that it advances one or another, but they're pretty consistent. So
Because we would want to be perceived as an inclusive, family supportive council. I think that's it for now, but just to ensure that we create some kind of rotation within the terms of reference for the full chair, because
Yeah, I think there's consensus on that, if I can read the table. Yeah. Councillor Baines?
Through you to the clerk, to be inclusive in this, are Mondays a challenge for staff generally? I mean, are they dealing with the same issues we are, or have they been able to clear their plate by, I'd laugh when I say this, Friday afternoon, and leaving their weekends free, and is it a first thing Monday morning that they have to wade in?
Well, if I can suggest, I think we should leave this debate until we have it on the floor, because I think staff too might want to think about their answer to that. Could be complicated. Okay. Any other comments on what's before us? I know that Deputy Mayor Fryer, you have a motion to amend?
I believe I would need to because the staff recommendation is the second and fourth. So if that's the case, I would ask, would it be a friendly amendment or? So I'll make an amendment to request that for support on it being the first and third Mondays instead of the second and fourth.
Okay, would there be a seconder for that? Councillor Jeffrey, thank you. Any questions or comments? I'll just say I'm going to support this because you've asked for it, but I have to say I was generally happy with how it was done because I thought having a week with both meetings, and I know it's quite a burden, you know, all Monday and all Tuesday, but then it left the next week free for just having meetings. But you know, honestly, I'm not fussed really either way. So we can try this. It's going to be a pilot, and let's see where we go in the fall. Okay. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And now we'll have the main motion. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is 6.2. This is P 2023-07 Collingwood Roundtable on Economic Development. And who will be reporting on this evening? Yep. Director Valentine, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm just going to provide a couple of introductory remarks, but we also have Manager Kenny joining us virtually for this particular item. So Council will recall that the impetus for this report was a resolution of Council that provided direction to staff to investigate options for the establishment of an Economic Development Advisory Committee or a similar body that would support ongoing communications with the business community and allow for the exchange of ideas and recommendations for town-wide economic development direction and goals. Manager Kenny, as noted, has completed his analysis on potential structures for such a committee, and the results are outlined within the staff report in your agenda package. They are relatively straightforward, but we do have Manager Kenny who's prepared to provide a summary of the staff recommendation, and he's also available to answer questions should there be any. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Good evening, Manager.
Thank you very much. And thanks for the opportunity to be here this evening. I'll just give you a quick, very brief outline and happy to take any questions or comments after that. So we are recommending an informal roundtable approach with up to 3 members of council, including the mayor, who would act as chair under the recommended structure. Membership from the business community is flexible and basically topic dependent. So if we want to talk about investment attraction, we could bring in relevant parties for that. If we want to talk about tourism, other stakeholders, partners, accommodators, those types of things. So it really is flexible to respond to the ever-changing nature of our business community. We have about 1,135 businesses with 1 employee or more, and that does not include the owner. About 2,500 sort of owner-operated businesses. Some are Ontario numbered companies, shell companies, but some are solo entrepreneurs. We have, made it so that there's the ability to engage stakeholders, partners, industry representatives. It's very flexible to what council needs, what the mayor needs in this structure. We have it as scheduled quarterly, but of course we can do more as required. We can do less as required. It's very flexible in that nature as well. And for us, it supports ongoing education and information sharing between council and staff, a really good outlet for that in economic development. So happy to take any questions or comments you may have, but that concludes the overview.
Okay, thank you. Would there be any members of the public, Clerk Almas, who wish to address the committee on this?
Your Worship, we do have an attendee that no hands are raised at this point.
Thank you. I'll read in the resolution. Whereas Council deems it expedient to have regular discussions with the business community, therefore be it resolved that Council establish the Collingwood Roundtable on Economic Development, and that the Mayor and up to 2 members of Council be appointed as members of the Roundtable, with the Mayor acting as chair, and that appointments to the Roundtable run concurrently with the Council term, and that the draft terms of reference attached to report P2023-07 be endorsed to guide the structure and activities of the Roundtable. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Houston, Councillor Doherty, thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Baines.
I propose to Manager Kenny, who sets the agenda for this? Is it the participants themselves? It is her worship?
Go ahead, Manager Kenny.
Thank you very much. It is a collaborative sort of work. So the mayor could, staff sort of working collaboratively, but the business community can also suggest topics to discuss.
Thank you.
Councillor Houston.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Your report recommends regularly scheduled. Do you see that being monthly, quarterly? What would be your recommended consistency for that?
Go ahead.
So we've recommended quarterly in the report, but of course we can do more or less. So if we have a topic of special interest or, a pandemic style event where we need to respond rather quickly, there are opportunities to do that more or less than the recommended amount.
That's good. Yep, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So just through to Manager Kay, I really liked this approach. I read it, so I'll just say I fully support it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No. I'll just say I also appreciate your recommendations here and all your thought that's gone into it. I do support it. I'm thinking that the initial meetings or two might be of a general nature to get some understanding of if there's some big topics that our business community have on their mind to help us get going. And so I'm really looking forward to, getting started on this. Certainly a passion of mine. Okay, so bring this to a vote. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. So we have two further staff reports that we're going to hear on from our treasurer. The first one is 6.3, followed by 6.4. The first one is T2023-07, 2022. It's an investment report. And then T2023-08, it's the 2022 debt report.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just provide a quick overview as these are standard reports that we provide each year.
Thank you.
The investment report itself, as I mentioned, is a standard report. It's required, provided by our investment policy each year. And it does show what the investments have occurred throughout 2022 and the amount of interest that we've earned year to date. As many of you and members of the public understand, it has been a very tumultuous couple of years over the last few years getting through the pandemic and now seeing interest rates climbing. We've at least been able to capitalize where we can. For the year ended 2022, we had about $94.5 million worth of investments in comparison to the last several years where approximately $100 million was in cash in our cash accounts. For 2022, we also see a total of interest at $1.7 million. In comparison to the previous years. Obviously, 2021 was quite difficult at $850,000, and 2020 was at $1.1 million. We did see better rates back in 2019 and 2018 prior to the pandemic, but of course, are starting to see those things level out in 2022 as well. We have multiple types of investments that we hold. We manage between GICs and primarily principal protected notes. These notes are guaranteed principal with varying interest rates and are dependent on the Big Six bank index that they're rated against. This has been a new type of investment since 2021. We began to invest in these from the town's perspective. And albeit the market values of those products are not looking so swell right now because of the way prime rate has increased so drastically, they have picked up in the last couple of months by another 2%. So that's good news. But again, the market value is not indicative of the actual interest rate we'll receive. In some cases, the interest rate is at about 4.5% per year, and in many other cases, it's much higher. It depends on the participation that is held for each bank note. And I think when we value these, we do value down to the book value. We don't record market value loss since we are guaranteed the principal portion. And you can see that in the information on the staff report. So I think that summarizes everything. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to field them.
Okay, thank you. Let me just read in the recommendation here that staff report 2023-07, 2022 investment report be received for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Fryer and Councillor Doherty. Oh, yeah. Okay, but sorry, I should have asked if there's a member of public who wished to speak to this report.
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. We do have one public attendee, so if the attendee would like to address the staff report, please press the raise your hand feature. And not at this time, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we were going to vote on receiving this for information. Did I get the mover and a seconder? Yep. Oh, okay. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mary Helen. So through the, I don't mind saying that these PPNs or whatever really make me nervous, because if they mature while the market value is down, while you're guaranteed your principal, you didn't make anything. So, and that's the way it works in my mind, because I've invested in these a couple times personally thinking they were a great idea. And the way the cycle works, you always end up, well, yeah, I got my principal out. But if I'd have just put it in a GIC, I'd have something to show for it at the end of the 3 years instead of this kind of cycle business. So I don't know if I actually get anxiety when I read this portion of the report because it's the market value at the time when it matures, and we can't control that. So I always question the wisdom of this investment. Anyway, that's my little rant on that.
Did you want to address that, Treasurer Quinlan? Go ahead.
I may, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Jeffrey. So to be clear, the market value isn't the value that that the PPNs are based against. They're based against the Big Six bank index. And just to give you an idea, if I compared over the last 20 years how the TSX has done, that's increased by 183%. But if I just take the Big Six banks, and this is what's really key and what makes them much less volatile and perhaps a bit safer bet in terms of the investment. If I take the average of the 6 banks over the last 20 years, they've gone up 514%. So in terms of being able to get the most bang for our buck, in the time that we were looking at investments, the PPNs were in the greatest return. The GICs at this time were less than what we were receiving in the account. Our account was at like 0.85%, and in some cases, we might have been able to get 1% or 1.2 in a GIC. Now, I know things have shifted a little bit, and I can understand the cause to stop and really take stock and think through it. But I think, again, when you invest in them, and what these particular items are is because they are backed by the Big Six bank. And when we see the historical sort of earnings of the big six banks, that is really what the key is. The market value's gone down because, similar to bonds, for example, when interest rates rise, and you can, in some cases right now, get a GIC for as high as 5.7, 5.8, depending on how long you want to hold that, then it impacts the way these are valued in the marketplace. So when I share what the market value is, it's only telling you that if I wanted to or needed to sell it today, we would, which we would never do, by the way, but that's how they would be sold on the market. That's what makes them a little bit better in comparison to a GIC, also because of the rates, but also because in times, once the market gets back to, and I mean, we don't know when it'll get back to normal, but we do hope soon it will get back to normal and level out, that if it made sense, we would sell them in advance and make that extra funding, if it made sense. At this point, obviously it doesn't. Back in 2021, the market values of the bank or the national bank ones were up by 130,000 in less than 6 months. So it made a big difference at that point. So I can understand that nervousness, but I think the biggest part of this is that nobody has a crystal ball, of course, but risk-wise, in order to get the most bang for our buck at that point, these were the best option. And albeit that I could put it in a GIC today in some cases and earn a point or two more, there was 18 months when I couldn't earn anything and I was earning less than 1%. And so it's very, very difficult. But I do really feel like these are risk averse, principal guaranteed. And I think, again, just the way the banks have performed, the banks have never lost, or very rarely lose. And if they do, then the whole economy is kind of going to bust. So I totally understand when you're looking at other equity, but this is a different type of equity, in my opinion.
You have a follow-up?
Just to say that I don't feel any better. But I'm glad you're going to watch this. Yeah, I guess it's just that old school. It's someone else's money, and when I'm looking after somebody else's money, I just want to feel like I'm not taking any kind of risk, because I think that's the way a municipality should be. Is there's not a risk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Councillor Doherty?
Thank you. I'll just say that I share the concerns that Councillor Jeffrey has just expressed with regard to the PPNs. And I had two questions. The first was relative to our budgeting of interest revenue. And just looking over the past 5 years, it appears as though, with the exception of 2021, that we kind of underachieved by, fairly significant amount. And I'm wondering if generally we should be budgeting on this revenue a little bit more conservatively than we are.
If I may, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Doherty. So I would agree that the past year budgets we weren't able necessarily to reach the budgeted interest. However, we did become a little bit more conservative beginning in 2021. And of course, we carried that on into 2022 because there was so much volatility in the market. And we have increased that slightly for 2023, but not significantly so. So certainly that we've taken that into consideration, and you're correct. From 2018 to 2021 at least, and even up to 2022 at this point, we have never achieved the budget, and largely because likely the budget was set a little less conservatively than I think it should have been. But there's other offsets throughout the budget as well.
Great, thank you. And my second question was, you referenced one fund, and I had actually thought that we were already using that tool, which is an investment tool that's, I think, 100% limited to investment of municipal funds.
If I may, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Doherty. The town has not been involved in the one fund yet. We have just over the last, say, year and a half, started to have the discussions about moving towards that. I think the difficult time, the timing of when I've moved into the position again, is that the market was just not there for us to invest in. And remember that the one fund is in fact equity, so it is risky, more risky in some ways than the PPNs. No, there is no guarantee on our principal, but certainly I think it's a healthy part of an overall financing plan or investing plan. We're just not quite there yet, but we're getting there.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Fryer?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. When I read through it's a very extensive report, and I'll admit I had trouble following it all and I had to do some follow-up questions with the treasurer, but they were really just kind of general in nature. But what had been presented, I had some concerns with the impacts of the principal protected notes, timing for one, but more immediate was it really delays the annual interest calculation for that $64 million. So I had a question in regards to the $64.5 million that's sitting in PPN. If that was earning 2.5% sitting in a GIC, that's about $1.6 million of interest. You mentioned in the report about the fact that in regards to general operating revenue, which is the interest portion that gets into the tax impact of the budget, that if it was $1.6 million of interest in that year, is it 10 or 20% roughly that would end up that's
If I may, Your Worship, through you to the Deputy Mayor, yeah, it's about 20%. Say, yeah.
So again, there's 1% of your tax increase that you did, because this is being delayed. Hopefully, it will come to fruition, and we will see some substantial. But it also seems to me like in 4 or 5 years, you're going to get hopefully an influx of money, substantial influx of money, because it'd be interest that's been earned over a period of time. So my other question I had was, because the PPNs, the first opportunity for any calling of, and that wouldn't involve the coupon, isn't until 2024. I've got some more detailed questions I'd like to ask, but I don't see any reason why they can't be done offline and such. But the question I had is in regard to the decision to put the additional amount in 2022 by previous council. Is there a report on that could be shared with council, just so we could see about that decision that was made?
If I may, Your Worship, through you to the Deputy Mayor. So back in 2021, we brought a report forward explaining that PPNs were an option and that we would like to invest in them. The investment policy allows staff to make the investments as required, as the treasurer is the prudent manager of the funds. So a report did not go back in 2022 to move those funds.
Okay. All right. Those were my questions.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. We have to vote on this. So we are voting on receiving this report for information. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report is the debt report. And Treasurer Quinlan, you have a report on this as well?
I do. Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to the members of council and members of public. This again is an annual report that lays out the amount of debt that the town is holding. At the end of December 31st, 2022, the town holds $18.1 million in debentures, of which they're for a myriad of reasons, but just as a reminder that a portion of those debts are not repayable or coverable by the water, wastewater and water rate payers or taxpayers, but are subject to an agreement that we have with EPCOR to repay that amount. And that amount at the end of 2022 was 6.1 million. We also no longer have any internal loans outstanding, as all the internal loans were paid with the asset sale proceeds. We do have one promissory note that is remaining with the CPUSB's original amount, or back through our water and wastewater division. And it was an amount of $6 million originally and is now down to 3.5 million. And finally, we talk about committed external debt. We don't have any committed debt outside of what we've included here as of today, although for the 2023 budget, we have included the Minnesota Storm Sewer Project as being slotted for a debenture and financing the amount of about 3.6 million. Again, once final tendered costs are received and we review the town's cash flow at that time, a decision will be made whether to proceed with the issuance of debt, either internally or externally. As part of our requirements, we also provide a debt servicing cost as based on a percentage of our own source revenues. And that amount in 2022 is now at 7.07%. Previously, it was at just over 9%. So we are making some headway there. And I think that wraps up any explanation I have.
Okay, thank you. Clerk Gomez, is there anyone who'd like to speak to council or the committee, I should say, from the public?
Your worship, there is no further attendees.
Okay, thank you. And the report before us as follows: the staff report 2023-08, being the 2022 debt report, be received for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Potts, Councillor Perry. Any comments or questions? Deputy Mayor Fryer?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I asked a question offline to the treasurer in regards to the pending loan for the stormwater work on Minnesota that will be completed in 2023. So I had a couple of follow-up questions from what she advised. 5.1 million is expected to be the total cost, with 3.6 million looked at as the possible loan that would be taken, or debenture. So the 1.5 million is coming from the gas tax reserve. So the first question I had was, how did you just settle on the 1.5 million as opposed to 2.5 million or 0.5 million, I guess?
Go ahead, Treasurer.
If I may, Your Worship, through you to the Deputy Mayor. So the 1.5 million was originally planned because when we look at the federal gas tax balance, and as well as what we're receiving over the next several years and our plans for the funding in other locations, it made sense to us at that time that 1.5 million would be allotted. We'll take that review again when the project is tendered. So that might go up slightly, and we would come back to council and say, you know what, it makes sense that really it should be in the $2 million range because of X, Y, and Z. But at this point, when the budget was being created, the 1.5 million was what was predicted and estimated.
Do you have a follow-up?
Just so roughly what balance is in the gas tax reserve at the end of 2022?
If I may, Your Worship, through you to the Deputy Mayor, I believe it's in the $3.6 million range.
And just one other follow-up. You also explained that it is likely that you'd look at it as an internal loan. If that is the case of what happens, I thought it would be worth explaining publicly how an internal loan works as far as recouping of interest by the reserve that the loan comes out of.
I may, Your Worship, through you to the Deputy Mayor. So yes, for example, if we decided, and it does seem likely at this point, that we would loan the funds to that particular project. For example, let's just use, to keep it really simple, we'd use a development charge reserve fund. And maybe it's our administrative reserve fund there, and it has excess cash because we don't require it in the next 2 to 3 years or 5 years, maybe is more in particular. An interest rate would be confirmed. We would likely go out and shop and see what the interest rates are that the current market is providing. And we would charge that amount of interest to the tax base, because this is a storm sewer repair and is a tax-based item. And that interest would then be calculated into the development charge reserve fund we borrowed it from. Or we may borrow it from a general reserve, or I'm using that as just the development charge reserve just because it was simple. Could be any reserve fund.
Just
Thank
one
you.
last follow-up. So the additional benefit of having reserves available to possibly fund other that don't is it keeps the interest payments internal, and so they will be based on what market is, but it doesn't go out to an external party.
Yep, that's true. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. Just 2 comments. Number one, with respect to the gas tax funds, or now the CCBF funds, with FCM advocating to double up, asking the federal government to double up that, there's going to be that opportunity going forward, because I think that's I'm just putting it out to the universe. The other thing was funny that the deputy mayor landed on a discussion about internal debt, because, back in 2014, this chart of external debt is never shown with what kind of internal debt existed at that point in time. And I would love, this is a huge success story in terms of how that debt's been brought down. And I think the policy that was made in 2014 after that BFI report to get the debt under control was a really, I'm really proud of that decision as it's shown here. But I think what would make it even more impressive is if you showed the amount of internal debt that was in the books at that time and how it got paid down in addition to, it's even more.
Okay, well, thank you. Maybe for next year. Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
Just to follow up to Councillor Jeffrey's comment, I too agree that it's a very successful situation. In 2012, there was $25 million in the bank. In 2022, there's $133 million. That success of that's because of the taxpayers. So I'm just the same as you. I'm worried about looking after their money because they've made the investment. So all the success goes to the taxpayer for what we've had to charge.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Baines.
Just following up on those comments, Your Worship, it's a shame that you can't do an annual State of the Town address to address these sorts of macro issues, to say to the voters, just look how far collectively we have come and what shape we're in, because it ought to be stated out there. Thank you.
That's a really, wise comment. Well, we'll think about how to do that. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll bring this to a vote. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. So now item 7 on the agenda is for departmental updates. And the first one is from CEO Skinner, Strategic Planning and Council Training Update.
Thank you very much. I believe that there's a short deck to bring up, please. Try and make that work on my screen here for a second. All right. So typically, when we have a new council, then one of the things that the Municipal Act allows is that council can go in camera for training. And sometimes this is really a great feature because we can have counselors ask theoretical questions about what might happen in certain legal situations. But in this case, I don't think we actually need to go in camera. We can talk a bit about the training and the strategic plan and do it right here in an open session. Next slide, please. So what we did as we sat down and thought about what would make the first year really successful, we put together a 12-month plan based on what feedback we'd heard from council in the past and some of the recommendations from senior staff. And we thought that the purpose of that 12-month plan and even the renewal of the STRAP plan was that if we could do it by November of this year to help the public get to know council, and that council and staff are community members who are listening and have the skills and dedication to run the town well, we'd be off to an excellent start. We wanted the best environment for council and staff to develop positive and respectful relationships because we know council brings a pile of new things to the table and have a lot of experience in out in the community. And of course, staff are, I believe, good at, in large part, in fact, largely in all parts, very good at their jobs. And that we would coalesce around a strong 4-year plan. And Councillor Jeffrey was just mentioning earlier tonight about how great it is to have a plan that council's developed together to guide the decisions that you're going to make moving forward. So next slide, please. And then we thought further, what would success look like for these 12 months we've gotten through a couple of together? Council will be fully up to speed with everything they need to be effective. We know and recognize each other's roles and would listen hard and respect each other. Council members would be being publicly recognized for their contributions to getting things done in this community, for the solutions that they're putting in place, and incorporating community insights and high quality staff advice. By the end of the first year, we're hoping that we would have a refreshed community-based strategic plan. You would know well the suite of programs and services that are offered here in the community, and there'd be a high-level multi-year plan, certainly for the remainder of this term and hopefully beyond. And the public would feel like council is listening and hearing from them and communicating with them. So the first thing that I just wanted to touch base on is that there is a detailed training plan for council. And one of the reasons that I wanted to speak to this even in open session is that moving forward, we want the public to know that anyone who's interested in being a council member will get trained on the job or retrained on the job if you are being reelected. And what we've done is put together a plan by the services that are delivered by the town, and a lot of training has been delivered. There's a number of pieces of training that are yet to come that we've metered out through the year, sometimes in matching when decisions will come to council. A few of the things that council should be aware there will be further training on include the lobbyist registry, procurement, delegations of authority to staff. There's some additional mayoral training or lead of council training, as well as a 6-month follow-up from one of our consultants around council roles and responsibilities. That'll give council a chance to ask any questions that you may have developed since the initial training. We have a taxation training, reserves and reserve funds, what we have and what they're for, media relations and social media training, our new approach to customer service as we move to the new software, geographic information systems, commonly called GIS, what they do and how council can leverage that to help make decisions. Emergency management training, which is focusing on the 2 key roles in emergencies, the mayor and the deputy mayors. However, the other members will be invited as optional. A bylaw services overview, an engineering overview that includes water and traffic modeling, master planning, why warrants and standards are important, how engineering supports some portions of development, as well as the development standards that people are required to design to when they design new communities for Collingwood. There's a number of sessions around parks, trails, harbor, rec facilities, arts events, and museum awareness, a specific inclusion, diversity, and equity training for council, and the option to create council's own acknowledgement of traditional lands. And I didn't mean by listing out that long list to mean that council had not received training in those items yet, but it suggested that further training will be provided. If there is anything that's not on this list that council would like further support or basic foundational information about, staff can absolutely arrange it. And if it's mentioned later in this meeting or offline, we'll make sure that we get the things that you need to you. Next slide, please. For the community-based strategic plan, council has approved two portions of that. One is a statistically significant community survey. So unlike Engage Collingwood, where the people who want to comment, and we love that, and we encourage more and more people to do that, the intention here would be an Ipsos or a Reid type survey where people are proactively contacted. And the proposal here is that it would be provisional in a procurement, so that we would make sure that we were getting a good price, and that was within our budget, as well as a consultant who would lead the strategic plan. I say here, and I'm going to talk briefly about what we think will happen in the strategic plan, is that it's pending improvements proposed in proposals from bidders. Because what we're planning to put in the request for proposal is that this is somewhat what we're thinking, but when the bidders who are experts in running and managing and facilitating strategic plans have better ideas or want to propose something to improve this, that we would be open to that. And of course, subject to your comments today. So just at a very high level, in the first month, we were thinking about information being provided to the consultant and council, including what the town does, so the programs and services you run today. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as collected to date from council and staff. So we have some input from already that we can summarize as a starting point. A first draft of the scope and types of questions for the community survey. Findings and some of the observations on the vision and strategic plan that have been in place for the last 4 years, and a draft of our community values, leaping from those values that are set out in our official plan. In the second month, we'd like to see activities such as the consultant briefing council on the intended approach and getting council's feedback and potentially starting the community survey. Slide, please. Month 3, that would allow some time for the survey to be completed and start to be supplemented by targeted community workshops. If there's specific areas that council already knows there's some they wanted to have community consultation on. In month 4, you'd get the results back from the survey and continue with the workshops. And we're suggesting a coffee with council event here. So it's early in the process, but you've already have then the initial community statistical input. In the next month, the 5th month, council would review the draft of findings and options for updates and provide some feedback and endorse these for public input. So you might ultimately, for example, choose 5 goals that are going to be very important for your term. But at this stage, you might have 6 or 7 or even 8 that have come from community input that you want to seek some more information on. Then you'd get your public information on that. And in October or November of this year, we hope, if everything proceeds on schedule, which is our intent, that council would receive the draft recommended vision and strategic plan. And over those 2 months, seek public input on that draft and hopefully endorse it to move forward. Just in time, or if you weren't quite done, at least you would have a lot of new information to also guide your budget, which you'll be making final decisions on through that October, December timeframe. Pending any further comments, once I've done a couple of other items that are in this deck, I'd love to take any input that you have on that structure. Next slide. So in year one, we've gone through a couple of months, but in the rest of the year, we've also suggested that theoretically these are the things that we are setting up for you. This month, we'd like to enhance your profiles on the website, the town's website. So we have right now your names and pictures, but we'd like to have more engaging profiles for each council member talking a bit about yourself. We're just finalizing monthly articles in the paper or newspapers, so notices from the mayor's office about what council's been up to and happenings in the community. A couple of things we're doing today, like proposed training. In camera, as this month goes on, you'll get the year start CAO performance plan. So you've already seen the operational plan, and this will be about you picking the things that are most important for delivery and the characteristics you'd like to see your CAO demonstrate through the year. And intention also is to introduce council virtually at an all-staff call. So we currently have one planned for March 31st, but we would poll council, the remaining council members, as the mayor and deputy mayor have already spoken at all-staff calls to find a time that works. April, we're looking at some check-in interviews with each council member to see how things are going and your own priorities. We'd also talk about a special council meeting around where our multi-year work planning stands today. So we would like to show you what we currently have from previous council decisions or staff planning for this year, next year, even the year after. So you start to get familiar with that. Wanted to have a discussion, just to salt a discussion around what would a municipal report card look like if we had excellence in municipal management. And Councillor Baines, you had just mentioned about an annual update on how we're doing and some important things you'd like to see reported back to the public. So debt would be, and success in reducing debt would be something that we might look at over the coming years around municipal reporting on how we're doing. We have a very draft curriculum vitae of what a council member would have achieved and achieved well in 4 years on council. So we wanted to talk about that. And also we have a policy that's very important. It's called the Council Staff Relations Policy, and it makes sure that people get the information they're expecting and that when the answers go out, they're distributed to all the members of council that need that particular answer. So we wanted to initiate a review of that to make sure it is meeting our current council's needs. Next slide, please. We would start to have some discussions with you about the Association of Municipalities of Ontario conference that's coming up in August, just to see if there were any delegation requests, things that are very important to you to move forward, and schedule a meeting with our MPP so that we could make sure that he was aware of anything that's important to council well in advance of the conference. And each quarter we have a report to council. Some parts are public and some parts are not. They're usually a month after the end of the quarter. So we would update you on our operational and strategic plan accomplishments. So that would be the existing strategic plan accomplishments because you wouldn't have the new one yet in May. In camera, so not in the public forum, we talk a bit about freedom of information requests, items that are not planning items, staffing and HR, so council's aware of those items that may be of interest or may be important in your governance of the municipality. And we would talk about our financials, and we may have our draft audit by that time. Next slide, please. June and July, we are planning a lunch with council and department heads and potentially a staff and council social event. We've had some wonderful ones in the past, such as our Christmas parties, and it's nice to get together so that people can meet each other and hopefully make the municipality stronger overall. In July, we would start our multi-year plan and our services-based budget. Any mid-year input for me would happen in camera based on the plan that we would set out later this month. And our budget survey would already be initiating in July, so for the 2024 budget, to give people lots of time to think about what they'd like to see happening moving forward. Slide. August, the intention is no committee or council meetings unless they're needed because you have a decision you need to make. But many of you would go to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario AMO conference. It's one of the great conferences, one of several. But I would encourage you, if you're interested, to go to that particular one. In September, we have our second quarter report to council, and we have been considering whether we may wish also some articles from each of you in random order to the community, talking about some of the interests that council members have and some of the things that council are doing. Staff would support you, of course, should you wish. The next month, October and November, we have another public coffee with council event suggested with a budget focus, so you can hear directly before you've made a lot of council budget decisions around what the public is thinking. We'd have in November multi-year budget needs, hopefully a celebration for the end of year one, and hopefully another council staff social event. That would hopefully lead us to the end of a good year, and I haven't repeated all the training that would go in between all of that. And I believe that that's the end of the update, and I would welcome feedback as the chair sees fit. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that very thorough outline of what 2023 looks like. Would anyone have any questions of our CEO at this time? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. So I really liked the outline. I was just wondering with respect to this planning, where identification of the strategic or the sustainable development goals aligning with our goals comes into that process. I'd like to see it spelled out, the will of council, because I think it's going to be critically important going forward to know how our goals align with the SDGs. Also, I'm trying not to feel slighted, but not appearing in May is the FCM conference. It will never get less expensive than to go to Toronto, as opposed to having to fly to Vancouver or Halifax or somewhere like that. So it will be in Toronto the last weekend in May. It's a terrific experience. And if you need to know any more, you can ask either Councillor Doherty or myself. She and I've gone and managed a couple and divvied things so that we weren't duplicating ourselves throughout the whole process. So add that to the list, and registration is open. However, registration isn't difficult to get. The hotel room is, unless you have somewhere to stay down there. You might get on and book your hotel room now.
That's good advice. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. Very detailed overview. I'm very pleased to see that we are going to attempt to put a multi-year budget and plan together. I was hoping that would be the case for 24. Because that's the last piece, in my opinion, of the puzzle, and we can start to work with all the pieces that Treasury has been able to put together and come up to where we can have a strategic financial plan and incorporate all the forecasting in regards to cash flow and those types of things. So I'm very, very pleased to see that we're going to work on a multi-year plan.
Okay. Any other comments? No. Well, I just want to thank you for this. Is a unique presentation to council, and it's very interesting to see how the year could unfold for us. And I know we're all looking forward to getting into our strategic plan and meeting with the community and seeing what the next 4 years might bring. The next item on the agenda is the water turnoff for tenants update from Treasurer Quinlan.
Your Worship, we have a really short presentation here. Next slide, please. So just as a little bit of background, we talked a lot about the arrears throughout the in-house billing project, and there was quite a bit of backlog on arrears that started sort of in late 2018 when the regulations for hydro changed. Just with other priorities and then the pandemic hitting, they put a pause on trying to collect here at Town Hall. So we initiated that again back in 2021. We talked with members of council about all the sort of worries we had and what types of things we could do. So we started out first with actually shutting off water, or in fact, we really didn't have to shut off water. Sending the notices of the threat of shutting the water off was enough to get payments moving. I believe we only ended up actually turning off up to 5 accounts or 5 homes for non-payment. Eventually, of course, they were paid and the water turned back on. But what we found was that it was very, very difficult to manage the shutoffs, considering the backlog that we were dealing with. So we brought forward a new process to members of council where we turned to tax rolling the amounts, whether it was a tenanted account or a property owner account, regardless of what they were. So we put out a lot of communication to all property owners, more specifically geared to our landlords, so that they understood that essentially, at the end of the day, that water is still the responsibility of the property owner. And that's gone quite well so far. Sorry, next slide. So at the end of 2022, we had transferred nearly $140,000 in unpaid water arrears for both property owner accounts and tenanted accounts. About 25% of that was tenanted accounts, though. What we're hearing from property owners now is that some tenants continually just allow the water arrears to be tax rolled, and that other municipalities were offering specifically to landlords the ability to request turnoff for their tenants. We've had a lot of or many conversations with some very frustrated property owners or landlords in that some tenanted properties are, of course, continually being tax rolled, and they don't really have any control over it. Leases aren't able to be broken and changed to include water payments as well. And there's a huge backlog in the landlord, in the tenant, I can't remember what it's called, the Landlord Tenants Board. So they're extremely frustrated. And we understand that they play a pretty big role in our affordable housing or in our housing situation in town. So we did look at the City of Barrie's policy. And basically what it does provide is allow the tenant or the landlords to request tenanted properties only be turned off for service for non-payment. So I'm going to go into that a little bit in the next slide. Essentially what we're going to do on a trial basis is provide that online form that the City of Barrie uses as well. There's some parameters that the property account will have to submit to. One is that the tenant's water arrears must have been tax rolled at least twice in the past 6 months. If you consider that, if we tax roll a particular account every 90 days, that would be 2 times tax rolling, right? So 6 months at a time. The account needs to continue to be in arrears. So for example, we may have tax rolled somebody for a second time, but now they're keeping up on their water bills, then they wouldn't be subject to a water shutoff. And also note that any arrears will still be collected and tax rolled, including the fees for both water turn on and turn off on the property owner's account. We feel like just with the discussions that we've had with landlords, they're feeling very, very frustrated, and in some cases, sort of out on a limb. And we felt that this was an additional customer service we could offer. Of course, we will expect a fee for turning it on and off. And we expect that this would help the situation. We certainly wanted to take a look at how many we thought might be included. And if we looked at the 2022 records of tax rolling, it would include up to about 7 properties at this point that would have been turned off had we followed this back then. So to give you an idea. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council? Deputy Mayor Fryer?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. Through you to Treasurer Quinlan. Who's the operating authority? In the case of electric shutoffs, it would be the Ontario Energy Board. That wouldn't be the case for water. So who would be the authority governing water shutoffs?
According to our bylaw, through
go
you,
ahead.
Your Worship, to Deputy Mayor Fryer, our bylaw mandates who has the authority, and it's between myself, the manager, McGinnity, and Director Slama as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Doherty?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just really wanted to make the comment. I'm really glad that you mentioned that it's 7 properties out of the hundreds of rental properties that we have in this community, not to discourage anyone who is thinking about renting a property, that this problem actually is uncommon. Certainly very small percentage.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you for that update.
Thank you.
Clerk Amos, would there be any members of the public who wish to make a delegation this evening?
No, there's Your Worship.
Okay. Under other business, Councillor Doherty, you have a motion, notice of motion you wish to read in.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you may recall, when I gave my report from the AMO board meeting in January, that homelessness and housing are the top priorities for the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. And in fact, it will be the top matter that will be discussed and presented at the OSM conference, Ontario Small Urban Municipalities, April 26 to 28. So AMO is calling upon all Ontario municipalities to support their position on homelessness in advance of the March budget presentation, which is anticipated to be March 23rd. And AMO's intent is to offer some course corrections on Bill 23 and the consequences that it may have, and also to recognize that homelessness in particular is a matter which needs to be dealt with by the province specifically. So this is a call to the provincial government to end homelessness in Ontario. And it's addressed to Premier Doug Ford, to be advised that the town of Collingwood, at its meeting held on date, adopted the following. Whereas the homeless crisis is taking a devastating toll on families and communities, undermining a healthy and prosperous Ontario. Whereas the homelessness crisis is the result of an underinvestment and poor policy choices of successive provincial governments. Whereas homelessness requires a range of housing, social services, and health solutions from government. Whereas homelessness is felt most at the level of local government and the residents that they serve. Whereas municipalities and district social administration boards are doing their part, but do not have the resources, capacity, or tools to address this complex challenge. And whereas leadership and urgent action is needed from the provincial government on an emergency basis to develop, resource, and implement a comprehensive plan to prevent, reduce, and ultimately end homelessness in Ontario. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Collingwood calls on the provincial government to urgently A, acknowledge that homelessness in Ontario is a social, economic, and health crisis. B, commit to ending homelessness in Ontario. And C, work with AMO and a broad range of community, health, Indigenous, and economic partners to develop, resource, and implement an action plan to achieve this goal. And further, that a copy of this motion be sent to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services, the Minister of Health, MPP Brian Saunderson, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. Thank you.
Well, thanks for that. That's a great motion. And just to advise council, this is an urgent matter. We do want to get it to the province in good time before the 23rd. So today I have asked the clerk to schedule a special council meeting just 10 minutes before our regular meeting on Monday. So we can consider this at that time. And if approved, it can get right off to the province.
Thank you.
Would there be any other businesses? Oh, sorry. C.O. Skinner, do you have something? Yeah.
I may have blinked at the wrong time, but I was wondering if that notice of motion required going to be voted on next week. Okay, thank you. And I do have another piece of business as well when you're ready.
And Councillor Jeffrey, do you have other business?
Yes, and it was a question arising out of our previous discussion with respect to the, actually two questions with respect to the procedure bylaw being open at this time. The first one was in terms of the committee of the whole, are we going to continue with the practice that if it's unanimous that we call it COW at FCM, if it's unanimous at COW, it'll go into a consent agenda approach within the council meeting practice?
Yeah.
All right. And then my other question is, it just reminded me when Councillor Doherty read out her notice of motion, and remembering last week when our poor mayor had to read out 3 pages of whereases before she got to a resolve clause. The deputy clerk had advised that perhaps while the procedure bylaw was open, we could look at not being necessitated to read all those whereases in the notice of motion and just read the therefore be it resolved. Have I missed the window of opportunity to do that?
The committee of the whole, when it is addressed to change the whereas clause, it doesn't change the intent. The preamble doesn't change the intent of the motion. We could take a look at that.
I guess alternatively, the chair could seek direction from council to waive the reading of the whereas clauses.
Yes, sure. In the meantime.
I'll do that. Oh, Theo, you have another business?
Yes, Your Worship. Just briefly, there was just a couple of facts around accessible transit, and I know that there's a report coming next week, but if you'd like, I could just talk about the status of we're doing. Okay, thank you. So Collingwood has worked really hard to bring together the services into a well-managed and economical service for those with disabilities who do require accessible transit. We provide a higher level of service now than many local municipalities who, for example, may not have any transit service. So we do provide the transit service. All of Collingwood's current buses accommodate wheelchairs, and for people requiring the Transit Plus door-to-door service, they can now receive it for a transit fare in the range of $2 with the same 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. hours as people taking conventional transit. So hopefully for folks that can use that service, it's cheaper than a taxi, and it can get them where they need to go most of the time. We do have 2 accessible buses running all day at the busiest times of day, which are mid-morning to mid-afternoon on weekdays in particular. One may need to book up to 3 days in advance, is true. Otherwise, one can call and be picked up often the same day. And even over the weekend, bookings can be made any opening hour. So from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., you can call and book an accessible Transit Plus ride. And taxi service in Collingwood is a private business. The town had previously paid the business to extend service for about 7 months until the door-to-door transit was put in place. And our analysis over that period did show that on average, the cost to taxpayers was about $80 per ride per direction for the subsidized taxi service. And the rider would also pay their taxi fare, which could be in the range of $20 for a one-way cross-town trip. The town is currently paying about $275,000 a year to ensure that we have the accessible service that's put in place now, even after the subsidy of the fares paid by each rider is considered. And overall, the conventional service, transit service, is also subsidized by taxes, and after fares and grants, it's about $705,000. That conventional service, as I've mentioned, is also set up to take wheelchairs and other wheeled mobility devices on all routes at all stops. We're in full compliance with all of the transit and taxi-related Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, often called AODA requirements. And as Council is aware, but I'll mention for the public, Council has directed advocacy with the province on the requirements for all municipalities, with the county around supports, including for social considerations for those with disabilities receiving transportation, and also with the hospital to make sure that we've aligned as much as possible their discharge times and how to make it easy for people to book a ride if you need one when you're leaving the hospital. Finally, Council has heard requests for longer hours and guaranteed on-demand door-to-door pickups for those with disabilities if they don't have their own transportation. And staff are ready to bring forward the report, which is being polished now for your consideration next Monday. So it will be published this week. So folks will have time to look through it. We really value our community members who use the Transit Plus service, and we're really pleased that it's a success. It is over 150% of the ridership we anticipated. So there are new riders coming in that hadn't been using the service previously. And I hope the facts this week are helpful in anticipation of the report being published soon.
Yeah, thank you for some of those clarifications. Okay, any other business? Okay, seeing none, it's time for the adjournment. Councillor Potts? I didn't look there, see?
I just did this.
Okay. All those in favor? Okay, thank you, everyone.
And again.